Good afternoon. Selamat sore, one and all. It's such a pleasure to see all of you here. Delighted that all of you can join us for this RSIS panel webinar, TNI Beyond 2024, between reform, modernization, and regional security challenges. The topic that we intend to discuss this afternoon relates to the Indonesian National Armed Forces, the TNI, Tentara Nasional Indonesia. And we've been interested to study the process of how TNI modernizes its forces since we first organized the conference back in, I believe, 2011, when Minister of the then former Minister of Defense, Dr. Yuwono Sudarsono, spent a day with us and shared many insights about the plans that he had in mind, as he hoped Indonesia would fulfill its expectations to modernize its force structure under the Minimum Essential Force Program. What this would do, at that time it was envisaged that the military would, through this initiative, enhance its external deterrence capabilities without the need to expand drastically its force structure by 2024. Of course, we are reaching close to 2024 now, so it's useful for us to take stock and try to get a sense of how the Minimum Essential Forces program is evolving, or how it has evolved. And more importantly, as we are now living in the COVID-19 environment, to try to get a better sense of, with economic growth figures now being compromised and available government revenues also decreasing. How then will this impact or affect the Minimum Essential Force program and its objectives? And of course, within the context of that also, what has been the progress of military reform, and how does military reform fit into the MEF blueprint, and what is also the scope of the TNI as it seeks to evolve and become a significantly well-structured force for the external defense of Indonesia. Also, I think we want to think about how the modernization program is evolving. And more importantly, this webinar gives us a chance to look at all these questions that I've highlighted. And we have, just two absolutely superb speakers with us here this afternoon to help us explore the questions that I posed in my introduction. Let me introduce you to our speakers. It's a great honor to have both Bapak Rodon Pedrason and Ibu Shiska Prabawaningchas with us this afternoon. Let me first introduce Bapak Rodon. Bapak Rodon is currently the Director General of Defense Strategy at the Ministry of Defense. Major General Rodon was previously a detachment commander of the Presidential Security Force. He was also Director for War Studies at the Indonesian Defense University, and also Governor of the National Intelligence College. He obtained his PhD in political science in 2015 from Heidelberg University, and is an expert on ASEAN defense diplomacy. That was the title of his PhD dissertation, and he has spent a lot of time, shaping Indonesia's strategy in the context of defense diplomacy. Major General Rodon has also served with the United Nations and participated in peacekeeping operations in Congo in 2001, and has been awarded distinctions and honors for his service to the Indonesian state, receiving both the Satyachana Wirakarya and the Satyayancana Wirasiaga medals during his duty with the Presidential Security Force. Ibu Siska is the director of the Graduate School of Diplomacy at Paramadina University in Jakarta. She spent a significant amount of time as a project coordinator looking at issues relating to civil-military relations and conflict management at the Indonesian Institutes for Defense and Strategic Studies, LESPRESI, from 2001 to 2005. She's had stints also in The Hague, where she focused on work relating to peace and conflict development. And she is also a graduate from a German university. She received her PhD from Humboldt University. Pak Rodon received his from Heidelberg University. And she has focused much on her research on peace building and the resolution of intercommunal conflict, focusing on Mindanao. I'm just delighted that we have both of them with us because, you know, our Indonesia program has had good contacts with the officer actually of Pak Rodon. We were involved with the Director General of Defense Strategy then when we were helping to plan the organization and the conceptualization of the Indonesian Defense University when Pak Sharifuddin Tipe was the Director General of Defense Strategy. And we've also got very close working links with the Graduate School of Diplomacy at Paramadina University. We did a project once with them on non-state actors and their role in the shaping of foreign policy with Pak Anies Baswedan and Ibu Dina Wisnu. So we are just with friends here today, and I just would like to invite both Pak Rodon and Ibu Siska to share their thoughts on this very important topic. We rarely get an opportunity to learn about the Indonesian military. So for me, this and for our audience this afternoon, this is a tremendous pleasure to learn from two wonderful speakers who have deep knowledge in this field. Let me first ask Major General Bapak Dr. Rodon Pedroson to share his thoughts, and then followed by Ibu Siska. Bapak Rodon, the floor is yours. Silakan, Bapak.
Thank you, Professor. I still remember when in 2012, I tried to apply as being your pupils or your students in the RSIS, but at the time maybe you're very busy or too busy, and then luckily I got the accepted by the Professor Oroko Song to be his students. So I left RSIS and then went to Germany at the time. So luckily now we are getting together to discuss something related to TNIs that maybe I know about this. Okay. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, let me reiterate my appreciation to Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Nanyang Technological University, for the invitation to speak in this webinar. It is truly an honor for me to have an opportunity to present my perspective on today's webinar entitled TNI Beyond 2024 Between Reform, Modernization and Regional Security Challenges. In this forum, I would address three major questions mentioned in the term of reference, namely, first, is military modernizations related to military reform, is it mutually exclusive or not? Second, what are the impacts of existing security challenges towards TNI's roles and modernization plans? And the third one, what are the potential security challenges for TNI, and how does the TNI answer those issues? However, I would not address each of the questions individually and give a direct answer to them. It is not because I do not want to, but rather because the aspects being questioned are interrelated and overlapping to each other, as well as related to other factors beyond my authority to answer. But I will do my best to address those questions. For such purpose, in this forum, I will discuss four subtopics, namely, the first one is the relation between TNI reforms and TNI modernization. And the second one, the impacts of existing security challenges toward MEF program. The third one is TNI's roles and strategies to address the potential security challenges. And the last one, the power beyond 2024. Before proceeding to the first subtopic, I would provide a brief overview about minimum essential forces program. About the minimum essential forces program, in building a strong defense posture, the Indonesian government used the approach of capability-based planning, concept, which is outlined in the program MEF, based on Indonesian National Defense General Policy, or we call it Jakumhanek 2010 up to 2014. MEF is the standard of strength basic minimum TNI, which absolutely must be prepared as the main fundamental prerequisites for the effective implementation of the main duties and function of the TNI to deal with threats. Thus, the MEF is a policy that focuses on military power building. Since the MEF concept is a defense force development plan based on capability-based defense concept, which plan for the development of military power, including the procurement of the defense primary weapon systems based on the identified threats by considering the state budget capacity. The government enacted the MEF program nationally in the National Medium-Term Development Plan, or RPJMN, to 2010 and 2014. The Indonesian government adopted the MEF policy for at least two reasons. One, what we can say, that various security threats have been emerging as a result of geopolitical and geostrategic dynamics, both regional and global, of course. And this situation makes the development of TNI forces essential and inevitable. Secondly, the budget allocation for national defense is limited because the government has to prioritize several other sectors beyond defense, such as education, health, and the economy. As a consequence, the current available defense budget allocation is only sufficient to meet the needs of building TNI's minimum essential force. The main objective of MEF is to strengthen TNI, which function as the main component of Indonesian national defense. The program aims to build TNI's basic capabilities that meet a certain standard for TNI to be capable of accomplishing its mission. MEF program is neither an arms race program or nor a force building strategy to win a total war. The relation between TNI reforms and TNI, modernization or MEF program, later. Okay. From President Abdurrahman Wahid, as we all know as the Gus Dur, to the current administration, President Joko Widodo, all of them already have placed a high priority on several agendas items that might be dubbed a strategic military reform. These reflect the complexities of reform within the political environment of the country. With all these development and weaknesses, these strategic reforms require institutional change beyond mere military reform and are long-term in scope and goals. Tni Reform is an effort to drive Indonesian Armed Forces, also known as abbreviation of TNI, away from its social and political roles as it used to have and be more focused on carrying out its main duties in the field of national defense by means of war military operation and military operation other than war, MOTWA. Other TNI reforms began in the year of 2000 through the decree of the People's Consultative Assembly number 6, the year 2000, concerning the separation of the TNI and the Indonesian National Police policy, and the decree of the People's Consultative Assembly number 7 in the same year, concerning the role of the TNI and the role of Indonesian National Police as well. This decision was strengthened by Law number 2, the year of 2002, concerning state defense, and Law number 34 of 2020-04 concerning the TNI. A majority of Indonesians believe that TNI reforms has been progressing well, seeing some from some indicators. One of the essential indicators is the formation of the Ministry of Defense, or MOD, as a civilian institution. Prior to TNI reform, the chief of TNI, also before known as ABRI, Angkatan Bersenjata Republik Indonesia, also served concurrently as Minister of Defense. Therefore, apart from the status of the MOD as a ministry, which was a civilian institution, it was not truly civilian, because the Minister of Defense was also the Chief of Armed Forces. Thus, back then, the entire national defense matters, including the making of defense policy, general policies, and the use of TNI forces and other defense components were in the hands of the military. Therefore, the reforms has changed not only the mechanism, task, structure, and culture of a previous TNI for more professional TNI in the future. And three most important issues in strategic military reform are the involvement of military civilian control, the broad concept of defense budget transparency, and especially on the defense procurement and reductions. What? Mana ni? Mana ni? Wait. And the reduction of the TNI's dependence on budget bonding or business budget funding. The TNI reform has also succeeded to drive the TNI away from practical politics and business activities, and at the same time to support TNI to become a stronger and more professional defense forces. The government realizes TNI has to possess good and modern defense equipment in order to be able to carry out its main duties as a major component of national defense in a professional manner. To achieve this goal, the government has gradually modernized the TNI's primary weapon system through the MEF program, which began in 2010 and is expected to be completed in 2024. So there is a link between Tni Reform and the Tni Modernization. Both are like two sides of a coin. They are inseparable from each other and complement to each other. On the one hand, the Tni Reform requires Tni to focus on carrying out its main duties in the field of defense, both through military operation for war and military operation other than the war, and giving up its previous social and political roles. On the other hand, Tni modernization is, in this case, through MEF program since 2010, is the government's policy to provide Tni with sufficient defense equipment to carry out its main duties in the defense sector professionally as mandated by the existing laws. And last but not least, it's to improve the prosperity of Tni personnel. However, Tni Reform was not the only reason for the birth of the MEF program. As previously mentioned, the decision on Tni modernization through MEF program was closely related to the increasing security challenges, including domestic, regional, and global. The Indonesian government realizes Tni requires adequate defense equipment, both in quantity and quality, to address these security challenges. Considering this, the government decided to strengthen Tni force, one of which was the procurement of defense equipment through MEF program. Next. The MEF program enactment had two major considerations, namely the identified security challenges and the limited availability of the state budgets for defense. So the dynamics of the security challenges are likely to have impacts on the MEF programs. However, the security challenges that become the basis of the MEF program since it was established in 2010 are still considered relevant with the current situation as security challenge, but need a revision, of course. Indeed, there are developments and changes in the regional security situations, especially in the South China Sea. Therefore, the existing security challenges, including security threats arising from the geopolitics and geostrategic dynamics in the South China Sea, do have a significant impact on the MEF program of TNIs. In accordance with Law Number 34 to 2024 about Indonesian Armed Forces, the TNI's role is an instrument of the state in the defense sector on state policies and political decisions. Based on this role, TNI has the main duty to uphold the sovereignty of the state, maintain the territorial integrity of the states, as well as to protect the nation and state from threats potentially can endanger to its integrity. We call it as kind of such of our national interest. For such purposes, TNI can conduct military operation for war as well as the military operation other than the war. Referring to the aforementioned provision of the law, no new form of security challenges has arisen recently, either domestically, regionally, or globally. The existing forms of security threats today are relatively similar to those identified in the law number 34, the year 2004. Therefore, the current development of the security situation requires TNI to review on the role of the TNI, or the role of TNI remain unchanged, even for the threat of for disease pandemic that we are facing now. Next. Based on the analysis of the strategic environment, Indonesia requires to address three categories of threats, namely military, non-military, and hybrid threats. These threats include territorial violation and foreign intervention, separatism, terrorism, radicalism, cyber threats, espionage, psychological warfare, biological weapon attacks, natural disasters, piracy, theft of natural resources, contagious diseases, and drugs trafficking. In order to deal with these threats, the Ministry of Defense has formulated for national defense strategies, namely the first one is enhancing TNI strengths as a major component of national defense by focusing the development of 2020 up to 2034 34 into 2020 to 2024. So we make it faster or make it a little bit in a shorter time. In order to improve many TNI obsolete primary weapon systems. Consider 30 years left behind, honestly we said about it. And compared to the development, compared to the developed countries' military capabilities, even compared to the Singapore as well. So developing, and the second one is developing a defense industry that focus on supporting the major defense equipment required by the TNI through research and development, as well as a mastery of defense technologies. The third one is carrying out defense diplomacy through defense cooperation to address common threats and maintain peace in the surrounding regions, as well as enhance Indonesian contribution in the UN peacekeeping mission. And fourth, implementation of the state defense program, or we call it Bela Negara, and reserve component atau komponen cadangan as the foundation of national defense. The state defense program aims to address threats from disease outbreaks, drugs abuse, racial issues, vertical and horizontal conflicts, terrorism, radicalism, and separatism, as well as to promote national unity and integrity. The last one, the requirement of military service implements law number 23, 2019 on the management of national resources for state defense, enacted in September 2019. The law stipulates that the military reserve is a voluntary services that can be mobilized to help the Indonesian military or TNI deal with armed threats. So the threats are only can be used for only what is it, agriculture or for a specific task, but also can help the military as well. Next, please. Unlike many other countries, Indonesia is not using the situation in the region to seek greater influence, but to seek its prosperity. Yeah, I am emphasizing to seek its prosperity, peace, and security in the region, to protect its sovereignty and national interests. Therefore, Indonesia MOD has a plan to revise the minimum essential force into essential force and covers 3 areas of program to develop its future TNI power planning beyond 2024. Those defense power program are main component capability development, which focuses on the capability of TNI, and technological program which include priority for defense industries, and a defense program which include priority for and defense development, which aim to develop the defense assets and the total defense concept. The detail of the planning can all be seen in the slides. Since this last slide tells us a lot of information regarding the Indonesian defense power planning. Therefore, I'm ready to answer questions raised for me during the Q&A session. Ladies and gentlemen, that's also all my perspective regarding TNI beyond 2024 between reform, modernization, and regional security challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bapak Rodon. Ibu Siska, the floor is yours. Look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Pak Leonard. Terima kasih juga untuk Pak Rodon atas presentasinya. Maybe there is some aspect that might be overlap with my presentation, so I try to keep steady with the presentations. As been mentioned before by Pak Leonard as well as Pak Rodon, so this webinar actually want to focus on answering 3 questions that already mentioned by Pak Rodon. But perhaps the way I want to engage in answering the questions would like to kind of have more critical understandings about the concept that being used in these discussions, because the type of imagining TNI beyond 2024 is something in the academic world, is something that going to predict something. And when we saying about 2024, of course, it signaling or it signifying indications of the political changing Indonesia, especially regard to these presidential elections in the upcoming 2024. So the way I would like to kind of put forward and give a contribution into the discussions, I would like to begin with highlighting in the next slide. I would like to focus on the 3 concepts and the way we're going to use the concept, and it's going to, I think, influence our understanding in answering the questions whether the reforms, then it influenced the modernization, and to what extent that the military reform, the reform, and with the modernizations that address the security changes. The way I would like to pose, because the way we cannot use the term reform, he's have a different, more conceptual meanings. It's more on a political. Pak Rodon already mentions black stars of the history. But when we're going to talk about relating the reform into the modernization, we might find another concept of transformations, which is in the between of those concepts. And because reform is more bigger spectrum, wider spectrums, including the political situations. In the next slide, the way I would like to engage the 3 concept, I would like to put more on transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary point of view to kind of avoid this kind of linear understanding or isolated understandings about the TNI, because the TNI, the Indonesia military, have their own process or evolutions, the way it can identify or have these understandings about the role and the function. So the way I would like to understand answering the questions and imagining TNI beyond 2024, when there is, of course, a big political changing within Indonesia in regard to the presidential elections, I would like to address in at least in this type of awareness discussion. We have this international relation, of course, is history, evolution of the TNI, the historical legacy is always have an influence in dynamics of the TNI, especially in the role and in the functions. The other approach I would like to take into account is, of course, the security and defense studies. I think this is very much comprehensively has been elaborated by Pak Rodon, and of course the political economy, because we have this kind of aspect of the way the TNI we know today. And the next slide, based on the methodological approach, I would like to propose that when we talk about TNI, imagining TNI in 2024, then at least I identified that at least there is 6 elements that might help us to understanding the way the TNI would kind of conduct the role and the function that have been given by the political authority. First, of course, when we talk about TNI, I imagine it's like an identity constructions. TNI have a long histories related to nation-state formations in Indonesia, as well as most of new state, especially in the decolonialization states. Of course, when we're thinking about the constructions identity of the TNI, we're thinking about the TNI as the guardian of sovereignty, the nationalism, symbolic. Of course, in the early days, TNI have these evolutions idea about the political economic interest. This is also part of the reform that being mentioned Pak Barodon before, the abolition, the reformations in democratic reformations in 1998 is mentions about the abolitions of social political role of the TNI, as well as the prohibitions of doing business. Of course, one of the things that important to understandings about the role and function of TNI, of course, the idea of the political civilian leadership, the aspect of security challenges, especially in regional and global threat. We have the aspect of global power rivalries. This is also very important. If we're talking about modernization, is mean we're going to talk about technology acquirement for weaponry, and the other thing, the last aspect that very important to thinking about or imagining about TNI beyond 2024 is, of course, the independent and active principle of Indonesia foreign policy that we're talking about, strategy of diplomacy. In the next slide, as I mentioned before, the way I would like to address the idea of reforms, modernizations, and also to what extent it create challenges to Indonesia. As already mentioned, of course, Pak Parodon before in his presentations, mostly the reform is connotated with what happens with the reform in 1998 when the civilian political leaders, because Indonesia is a state based on law, decide to separate the police from the armed forces. The secondly is related to the TNI social political role, including in the military. This is things that I think we need to appreciate, that the initiative to take a further move, withdraw from the parliament, come from the leaders of TNI fractions at that times. The new law of defense and TNI, as Pak Rodon already mentions before, that the TNI after the reform focus on defense sectors of Indonesia. One of the things that might be interesting to see is this prohibition of TNI doing business. And when we talk about modernization, some of the discussion, some scholars would argue that when we talk about modernization, specifically on the TNI, we might talking about its transformation, including the posture of TNI. And the next slide, this is come with the modernization. Of course, when we talk about modernization, I think the policy of minimum essential forces that have been clearly explained by Pak Rodon is defined as the civilian commitment to then transform the postures of TNI to be more, I think, more professional, that Parodon mentions the way it be able to address more strategic new changes between conventional and non-conventional threat, including, as Pak Rodon already mentions, about new cyber threat. In the next slide, when we talk about modernizations, I think this is already slightly mentioned by Pak Rodon, but I would like to focus that there is slightly changes of the posture of the TNI. It can be referred to the several law enacted by the president. So within the organization, within the TNI from the headquarters, there is some changes into within the posture of TNI. And the next slide is, this is based on my last research with a colleague from LIPI, Lembaga Ilmu Pengetahuan Indonesia Science, and also impartial. We're gonna try to kind of have an evaluation to what extent the MFI transformations did happen. So when we, in regard to the structural changing within the TNI posture, yes, there is changes in the postures. We cannot identify several changes within the posture within the TNI, including the personnel aspect of interoperability, force capacity, command and control forces, defense economy and procurement, weaponry system, as well as response to threat and international cooperations. I think I want to skip there, but to answer whether the modernizations also affect the postures of the TNI, yes, there is a commitment to change the posture in regard to can adapt with the new coming threat. In the next slide, as like Pak Rodon mentions, that this policy of minimum essential forces already start in 2010, and this is the third phase of the program, and it expected to be achieved 100% in 2024. Next slide. This is just a brief overview in regard to the challenges of budget. Pak Rodon mentions about there is other priority other the defense. There is a new need also with educations and health. So I think this is just some spending overview of the budget that we can see. There is a fluctuation between the projections and realization, and the way this budget being absorbed. And in the next slide, I also give a slide. I think this is the new things of dynamics of the way the modernizations goes. I think there is presentations between the military budgets in reality based on the PDB of Indonesia, as well as being announced by Spirit. In the next slide, when we try to focus on the modernization in regard to the very common remember of the different side of modernizations, I think when we focus on thinking about modernization, talks about weaponry, I think the budget say something like that. And what happened, I think one of the reasons the slightly budget would be like this. In the next slide, you can see that the allocation for distribution of modernization of each force is quite different. In the next slide, yes. So you have these distributions allocation of the weaponry modernization. We're talking focus modernization to the weaponry. So we have a different slide, different process in within of the forces. And yeah, so when we talk about modernization in regard to modernize the weaponry is there. So coming back on the last challenging in regard to what extent that the reform and the modernization would be able to address the security changes, I think the key aspect that need to be focused is when we talk about security changes, especially in regional, it's not just connect with what happened with the domestic thing, but also with the global changing. So talking about security changes, I would like to pose our attentions into aspect of diplomatic engagement and bilateral relations, and the principle of active Indonesia in independence and active in foreign policy. And what important when we talk about regional security changes in Indonesia foreign policy, of course, ASEAN is always at the center priority of Indonesia foreign policy. Indonesia is very keen to keep promoting the good neighborhood. Pak Rodon mentions about Indonesia focus on prosperity. And the key term when we talk about security changing, we talk about the capacity of Indonesia in regard to do security cooperation and defense diplomacy. What you might be interested into the practice of Indonesia defense diplomacy is that I sometimes reading a lot of literatures in regard to definition of defense diplomacy that mostly try to portray the role of the military in the post-Cold War situations, but to take that into an Indonesia context, I think what happened with Indonesia, that the use of military for foreign policy purposes is already go back since 50. I think Pak Rodon mentions about our military role in the peacekeeping. So it's part of these implementations of Indonesian national interest to keep the world peace, I think. So when we talk about defense policy, not only we talk about try to with the role of the Tni, we also keep up with this engagement of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So what I would like to keep attentions on the security changes, I think, in regard to Indonesia foreign policy, as the next slide see, that Indonesia is always put South Asia, the neighborhood, into the priority of its foreign policy, and then you have these strategic partners in Asia Pacific and America and Europa. So if we try to connect that into the idea of defense diplomacy or security cooperations, I think this next slide would give you short understandings about foreign policy priority and diplomatic engagement. Because I'm just thinking when we talk about process of modernizations, we also talk about technology transfer, and also talk about keeping security, preventive diplomacy for security. So this is just give you a slide of idea when we talk about our representative that put defense attaché into a diplomatic representative. And the last one, I think one might be missed by Pak Rodon in his presentation, is that I think the maritime world priority, the way it become the political agenda at the first period of Jokowi, I think also represent in the way that Indonesia also more eager to kind of more involved in maritime issue. It can be, for example, reflected into some of the discussion happening with the ASEAN Defense Ministerial meeting, for example, when issue of maritime is there. And the last slide, I just want to kind of go back on the questions that being posed by the RSI about imagining Tni beyond 2024. I think the answer could be not simplified, but I'm just thinking about putting this quadrant into these challengings. What sure is that the role of the TNI, I put that the role and the function of TNI is always being the instrument of the state to keep the security and defense in regard to the unitary states of Indonesia. I think referring to those aspects between the history, the political economy, the civilian leaders, as well as the challenges of global threat and those sort of things. I think imagining TNI beyond 2024 is actually depends on the way the interactions between priority of the threat, the escalations of the threat within political discourse, as well as to what extent that the political leadership then can make sure that the role and the function of TNI in regard to the competency and the capability can make sure and be effective to ensure the interests of Indonesia. I think I would like to stop my presentation there, Pak Leonard, and I wish to receive a response and comment from others.
Thank you so much, Ibu Siska. I think we are running short of time. What I've decided to do is to try to compress the questions into 4 categories, which we look forward to Bapa and Ibu answering. I think the first area that our participants would like Bapa and Ibu to focus on is the issue of threats and long-term challenges. Where exactly are the threats for Indonesia? Are these threats internal or are they external? And in this context, right, when we think in terms of the long-term challenges facing Indonesia in the defense and security realm, what type of threats does the MEF actually address? So that would be one area that we would like to focus on. The next would be a main theme actually for all of us concerned about the realization of the MEF, the challenges posed by COVID-19. You know, we would anticipate a limited budget, and how does that essentially affect the MEF goals and objectives? The third area is one that focuses on defense industry. What is the assessment of the defense industry? Can the local defense industry contribute to the MEF objectives, or will Indonesia look to offsets as a strategy to compensate if there are shortfalls in the defense industry side of things? And then finally, there is a question regarding the reserve component. What is the plan essentially to integrate, manage, and mobilize the reserve components? So perhaps we can start first with Bapak Rodon, and then Ibu Siska, please share your insights as well. Yes, Pak Rodon.
Thank you, Professor Leonard. Regarding the first question about which can be a consideration of the MEF, which kind of threats are more dominant, internally or internationally or outside the countries. We are still thinking about how to modernize our the posture of our armed forces. So in terms of the primary weapon system or major weapon system, as I mentioned before, we think that our weaponry system a little bit obsolete compared to others neighbors country. So we are not trying to modernize our military equipment due to a kind of threats from other countries, but our concern is the prosperity of our personnel, the capability of our military, and it also showing to other countries based on the under the administration of now even Mr. Prabowo saying that never think like before. Previously, all Indonesian flag officers, or maybe my seniors, saying that let's say there is no any war within the 20 or 30 years, we try to keep it out of keep out of such kind of the idea. We think that the threat is always there, but we think more deeply into our country. What kind of the threat that we are facing now internally? We have the problem of less separatism, terrorism, but to keep the military being a high posture for the people, not to saying that Indonesian military is okay, easy to cope. We try to have to modernize our equipment. So internally, we want to say to others that Indonesian military ready for combating a kind of such internal threats or problem, but also ready to have a cooperation with other countries with the same level. Whereas saying about the modernization, at least we have three prescription or three what I said, three ingredients about that. The first one, the law of Indonesian allow to buy or to modernize our weapon. The second one, it can be used by our military for interoperability within all services in the country, for army, for navy, also for air force. And then such kind of the equipment or the modernization equipment can be leveling with other countries or other region in other neighbors country in our region. And the third one, the other reason is we should have a clausule of transfer of technology, meaning that the technology having by other countries, let's say Singapore, America, or maybe Russia, should be also known by Indonesian personnel. So which one, come back to the first question, which one is more concerning, internally or internationally? Both within the same level. But to be honest, I said, internal problem, that's our priority to cope it firstly, and also to show to other country in neighbor country, Indonesian military capability much better than before. So that's why not staying in MEF, but we move forward fastly or faster than before to prepare our military in the capability as an essential force. So this is the first question I can answer. About the second question, concerning the limited budget of the increasing tension in the region. So, no, sir. No. Jawabannya pertama ada baru di atas tadi. Okay. So, as I said before, if under the Minister of Pak Prabowo, the commitment to our to improve our weapon system and the human resource capability will be our highest concern. Joint military exercise is also the military diplomacy of now. In my own research, we call it a defense diplomacy. Let's say that the ministers not only going to China, not only going to America, there's also been inviting by those countries, but he also went to Russia, went to Turkey. Our concern now, having a close relation with 5P countries, 5 permanent member of a Security Council. So we also want to have a close relation with the France. We also have a close relation with the UK, the America as well, the China, also the other country like India, the UNC, UN Security Council. So that's kind of defense diplomacy. Want to find a better technology, a better way, or the same position as the military, Indonesian military. So we put our neighbors in the region is in an adequate position, but also want to have the same position with other countries globally. So therefore, I'm sure that the impact of this COVID-19 outbreak will only temporarily disturb Indonesia defense budget. But for sure, it's not for a long-term plan. The minister tried to create the budget immediately when put on his position now as a minister. So about the next question, how has COVID-19 impacted the MBF, specifically with regard of the emergence of infection disease and so on? I tried to answer this. In general, there will be no significant impact actually, as I previously mentioned, to the long-term planning. I mean, so however, it will only impact for the short term. In the future, I believe to solve this COVID-19 outbreak, TNI will cooperate with more other countries in military medicine. Such kind of the cooperation also been put in ADMM plus. We have 6 issues related in the ADMM plus. One is military medicine. So we will be cooperated more specifically in the military medicines, since that is our common threat faced by the countries globally, not by Indonesian. Next question is, what I about the question, to what extent will the Indonesian continue to emphasize on the development of local defense industrialization? Okay, I believe in the future. As the last slide, as I mentioned before, we gave a priority to Indonesian local defense industry or incorporated with other countries to impose the offset of on the local defense industries is required by the law or regulation regarding of offset itself. So therefore, we will always negotiate with our partners because it's been imposed in the regulation. There will be no change on the policy itself. So let's say cooperating together, not only with certain countries, we open minded with other countries related together to cope the problems not only for COVID-19, but all problems related to the specific issue that can be raised with another meeting within the ASEAN member state in our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Bapak. Excellent. Thank you. Ibu Siska, please look forward to your presentations. Ibu, you're muted. Please unmute yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Leonard. I hope I still remember all the questions. I can answer it correctly as is expected.
No
but
problem.
regarding
Sure
regarding to the I think what I get from the first question is about the threat. I think one of the things that we can usually see based on the policy making is always referred to the what defense papers usually, and I believe that this year's perhaps Pak Rodon can correct me, is expecting that the Minister of Defense will launch a new what defense papers this year. So in regard to this kind of threat, I think back on the structural changes, the posture that I mentioned before, There's also follow-up of creating new tasks of cyber sections within the military as well. So when we talk about threat, I think what happened is about combinations between this political happening with security domestic, because this is kind of a particular contextual idea when we pose a questions like a threat, because the idea of security and defense sometimes is under discourse. But when talking about threat, I think what I can say that in regard to defense and military threat, I think what happened in Laut Natuna Utara in South China Sea in regard to new movement from the China, for example, is become one of the big concerns, and I think it's followed up by prioritizing of deployments of military there. But when we talk about threat issue, I think the spectrum is very wide. You can name it like we have an health issue. The COVID-19, of course, is a new threat that every countries, I think last week I also read about Prime Minister of Boris Johnson also thinking about inviting military to respond to COVID. But I think in regard to the security, I think there is a very contextual circumstances in regard to there is a problem with violence within Indonesia domestically, especially issue Pak Rodon mentions about idea of separatism in the field of the state. This is also become a public discourse. But what I can see in regard to the threat, the commitment of Indonesia of mentoring peace, I think is being delivered by Indonesia commitment to keep active in sending peacekeeping troops to the UN, and I think this is one of the things. So in regard to the MFA, the modernizations, what I remember Pak Wardon mentions about capability approach in evaluating the roadmap of Indonesia modernization within the minimum essential forces. But correct me if I'm wrong, I think one of the idea of this modernization is that Indonesia military could reach capability of green helmets. I think the way the Indonesia defense could secure within this maritime zone, the littoral state. So I think this is the idea of having the capacity of the military. But as far as I can understand, I think there is a dynamic of achieving some target, and I think this is also under evaluations. Especially, we all know aware that this COVID-19, although Pak Rodon mentioned is temporary, but I think there is also a fact that the geopolitics will change because of the contraction on the economy. So it also would kind of impact the way Indonesia projecting a threat, a global threat, as well as also when we talk about threat, it also talks about economy, those sort of things. And when we relate that into the modernization, Pak Rodon mentions about technology transfer, it also would connect with how well we establish bilateral relation with the respective country. And I would try to connect that into the issue of military industry, actually, in which that when I saw the development of defense industry, I think there is a slightly progress of the government commitment to support the industry, but I think there is some issue of technicality. I heard a problem occur when, for example, with what happened with our procurements with these from the South Korea, I think there's the problem of technicality. But I think in regard to the defense industry, I think there is a commitment. I think there's a political commitment from the government to kind of support that in the expectations that this way of modernization can be fulfilled by domestic supply. Then it come again that the wish that Indonesia could be mandiri independence with this all the weaponry system. I think that's it that I can respond on the questions.
Thank you, Ibu Shiska, Bapak Rodon. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, and we've come to the end of this webinar. It has been a real pleasure to listen to Bapak Major General Dr. Rodon and Dr. Shiska as well, who has provided us with so many useful insights on this important topic. I want to thank Bapak Ibu for their time and their presence with us. Thank you also, ladies and gentlemen, for participating in this RSIS webinar. I appreciate our speakers for their excellent insights on Tni modernization and the reform process. Both our speakers have provided us with a useful sense of where the TNI is on their MEF journey and what lies ahead for the Indonesian military. Their presentations have reflected to all of us how crucial will be the role of the Indonesian military in safeguarding not only the country, but also regional stability. Sekali lagi saya ucapkan terima kasih banyak kepada Pak Rodon dan Bu Shiska atas kesediaannya berbagi dengan kami. Sampai ketemu di kesempatan di berikutnya. It is a real pleasure to see all of you, and as well from the audience. I wish I could see all of you, but I'm afraid I can't. But I want to thank all of you for joining us for this webinar, and wish everybody a happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Enjoy your day, and thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Bye-bye.